Detective Inspector Marcus Thompson had served the British royal family for 12 years, but nothing could have prepared him for what he discovered on that cold February morning. As the head of Queen Camilla's personal security detail, Marcus had access to areas of the palace that most people would never see. His reputation for discretion and loyalty was unquestionable, which made what happened next all the more shocking. It started with a routine security sweep of the Queen's private chambers. Marcus was conducting his weekly inspection when he noticed something unusual near Her Majesty's writing desk. A small glass vial had rolled behind the ornate mahogany furniture, catching the morning light streaming through the tall windows. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple medicine bottle, but something about it seemed out of place. Marcus carefully retrieved the vial, noting the strange labeling that didn't match any of the Queen's known medications. The label bore the name of a private laboratory in Switzerland, known for conducting highly confidential genetic testing. His years of investigative training kicked in as he examined the container more closely. Inside, he could see traces of what appeared to be biological samples. The discovery troubled Marcus deeply. As someone who had dedicated his life to protecting the royal family, he understood the implications of unauthorized genetic testing. Such procedures could only mean one thing: someone was investigating the Queen's DNA for reasons that weren't officially sanctioned. The question that haunted him was whether Queen Camilla knew about these tests, or if someone else was conducting them secretly. Unable to ignore his findings, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He carefully photographed the vial and its contents, documenting every detail with the precision of a seasoned investigator. The serial numbers, laboratory codes, and even the smallest markings were captured in high resolution. He knew that once he moved forward with this information, there would be no turning back. That evening, Marcus contacted his trusted colleague at Scotland Yard, Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Williams. Sarah had worked on sensitive cases involving public figures before and understood the delicate nature of such investigations. Over a secure phone line, Marcus shared his concerns about the mysterious vial and the potential implications for the royal family's security. Sarah's response was immediate and serious. She explained that unauthorized genetic testing of royal family members could indicate several concerning scenarios, from blackmail attempts to succession disputes. The fact that the testing was being conducted secretly suggested that someone with access to the Queen's personal items was involved in what could be a major conspiracy. The next morning, Marcus found himself in an impossible position. His loyalty to the crown demanded that he report the discovery through official channels, but his instincts as a former detective told him that the situation required careful handling. He realized that approaching Queen Camilla directly might be the only way to determine whether she was a victim or somehow complicit in the genetic testing. As he prepared for his morning briefing with the Queen, Marcus rehearsed different approaches to broaching this sensitive subject. He understood that his career and possibly his freedom hung in the balance. Accusing a member of the royal family of impropriety without concrete evidence would be career suicide, but ignoring potential threats to the monarchy would be equally devastating. The weight of his discovery pressed heavily on Marcus's shoulders as he walked through the palace corridors toward the Queen's private study. Servants and staff members nodded respectfully as he passed, unaware that he carried information that could shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. Each step brought him closer to a confrontation that would test everything he believed about duty, loyalty, and justice. Standing outside the Queen's door, Marcus took a deep breath and steeled himself for what was about to unfold. He had no idea that within the next few minutes his world would be turned completely upside down, and that Queen Camilla's reaction to his discovery would reveal secrets that had been buried for decades. Marcus knocked gently on the heavy oak door and waited for permission to enter. Queen Camilla's voice called out from within, inviting him to come forward. As he stepped into the elegantly appointed study, he found Her Majesty seated at her writing desk, reviewing what appeared to be official correspondence. The morning light illuminated her face, and Marcus noticed something he had never observed before, a hint of anxiety in her usually composed demeanor. "Your Majesty," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was about to reveal. "I need to discuss a matter of utmost importance regarding your personal security." Queen Camilla looked up from her papers, her eyes meeting his, with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She gestured for him to continue, setting down her fountain pen with deliberate care. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew the vial, placing it carefully on the desk between them. The Queen's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face drained of color, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached toward the glass container. For a moment, the room fell completely silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. "Where did you find this?" Queen Camilla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus could see that she recognized the vial immediately, confirming his suspicions that she was somehow connected to the genetic testing. Her reaction told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't the discovery of an unknown threat, but the exposure of a carefully guarded secret. The Queen stood, slowly, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. With her back to Marcus, she began to speak in measured tones about events that had taken place decades earlier. She revealed that the genetic testing wasn't recent. It had been conducted years ago when questions about her family lineage had first emerged. What Marcus had found was evidence of a truth that could potentially destabilize the entire royal succession. As Queen Camilla turned back to face him, Marcus could see tears forming in her eyes. She explained that her late mother had confided in her about a family secret that had been buried for generations. The DNA testing had been conducted to verify suspicions about her true parentage, suspicions that, if proven correct, would mean she had no legitimate claim to her position as queen consort. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had expected to uncover a conspiracy against the queen, not discover that she herself was living a lie that threatened the very institution he had sworn to protect. Queen Camilla's composure began to crumble as she described the agonizing years of uncertainty and fear that had followed her mother's deathbed confession. She revealed that her mother had admitted to an affair with a man who was not her legal husband, an affair that had taken place during the time of Camilla's conception. The implications were staggering. If the DNA tests confirmed what her mother had suspected, it would mean that Queen Camilla's entire identity was built on a foundation of lies and deception. Marcus listened in stunned silence as the Queen described her desperate attempts to verify the truth through private genetic testing. She had used her connections to arrange for discrete DNA analysis, hoping to either confirm or dispel the doubts that had plagued her for years. The vial Marcus had discovered contained samples that would provide definitive answers to questions, that could destroy her marriage to King Charles and her standing within the royal family. The weight of this revelation pressed down on both of them as they stood in the quiet study. Marcus realized that he was now the keeper of a secret that could bring down the monarchy itself. Queen Camilla's pleading eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of judgment or condemnation. Instead, she found only confusion and a deep sense of duty warring with his growing understanding of her impossible situation. "I never wanted any of this," Queen Camilla said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I never asked to be placed in a position where my very existence could threaten everything that Charles and his family have worked to preserve. But I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. I had to know the truth, whatever the consequences might be." Marcus felt the full weight of his responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a security officer protecting a member of the royal family. He had become the guardian of a secret that could reshape British history. The question that haunted him now was what to do with this knowledge and how to protect both the Queen and the institution of the monarchy from the devastating consequences of the truth. The silence in the room stretched on as both Marcus and Queen Camilla grappled with the enormity of what had just been revealed. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice careful and measured. "Your Majesty, have you received the results of these tests?" The Queen's response would determine the course of action he would need to take, and potentially the future of the British monarchy. Queen Camilla moved back to her desk, opening a locked drawer with a small golden key. From within, she withdrew a sealed envelope bearing the logo of the Swiss laboratory. Her hands shook as she held it up for Marcus to see. "The results arrived 3 days ago," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I haven't been able to bring myself to open it. Once I read what's inside, there will be no going back." Marcus understood the paralyzing fear that had prevented the Queen from opening the envelope. The contents would either confirm her legitimacy or destroy everything she had built with King Charles. Either outcome would require difficult decisions and potentially devastating consequences for the royal family and the British people who looked to them for stability and continuity. "Perhaps," Marcus suggested carefully, "we should consider the implications of both possible outcomes before you decide whether to open those results." His training in crisis management kicked in as he began to analyze the situation from multiple angles. If the DNA tests confirmed Queen Camilla's legitimacy, the secret could remain buried. But if they revealed the truth her mother had suspected, the consequences would be far-reaching and potentially catastrophic. Queen Camilla sank back into her chair, the weight of decades of uncertainty evident in her posture. She began to share more details about her mother's confession, painting a picture of a young woman caught in an impossible situation during a time when scandal could destroy entire families. Her mother had been married to a man she didn't love, trapped in a relationship that was more about social standing than genuine affection. The affair, according to her mother's account, had been brief but passionate. It had taken place during a period when her legal husband was away on extended business, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. The man her mother had been involved with was described as intelligent, kind, and completely unsuitable for marriage due to his lower social status. When she discovered her pregnancy, her mother had made the agonizing decision to let her husband believe the child was his. Marcus listened intently as Queen Camilla described the emotional toll this revelation had taken on her. She spoke of sleepless nights wondering about her true identity, of looking in mirrors and searching for resemblances to the man who might be her biological father. The uncertainty had affected her relationship with King Charles, creating a barrier of secrecy that she had been unable to cross. "Charles doesn't know," Queen Camilla admitted, her voice heavy with guilt. "I've carried this burden alone for so many years. Every time he speaks proudly of our union and what it means for the monarchy, I feel like a fraud. I've wanted to tell him countless times, but I couldn't bear the thought of destroying his faith in me and in our marriage." The revelation that King Charles was unaware of his wife's doubts about her parentage added another layer of complexity to the situation. Marcus realized that they weren't just dealing with questions of royal legitimacy, but with the potential destruction of a marriage that had been built on incomplete truth. The personal and political implications were becoming increasingly intertwined. As Queen Camilla continued her painful confession, Marcus began to understand the true scope of her dilemma. She wasn't just worried about her own position. She was terrified of the impact her potential illegitimacy could have on Charles's reign, on the succession, and on the stability of the constitutional monarchy itself. The weight of an entire institution rested on the contents of the unopened envelope. "I need to know the truth," Queen Camilla said finally, her voice gaining strength. "But I also need to know that whatever we discover, it can be handled in a way that protects the monarchy and the people who depend on it for stability. Can I trust you to help me navigate this situation, regardless of what those results reveal?" Marcus looked at the sealed envelope on the desk, then back at the Queen's pleading face. He understood that his answer would determine not only his own future, but potentially the future of the British royal family. The decision he made in the next few moments would either help preserve one of the world's oldest monarchies or potentially contribute to its downfall. The weight of history pressed down on both of them as they stood on the precipice of a discovery. That could change everything. Marcus knew that there was no neutral position in this situation. He would have to choose between his duty to the crown and his obligation to the truth, understanding that both choices carried enormous risks and consequences. Marcus took a deep breath, understanding that his next words would seal both their fates. Your Majesty, I pledge my complete discretion and support, whatever those results may reveal. But we need to approach this systematically and consider all possible outcomes before we proceed. His years of experience in handling sensitive situations had taught him the importance of thorough planning before taking irreversible actions. Queen Camilla nodded gratefully, relief evident in her expression. For the first time since their conversation had begun, together, they began to discuss the various scenarios that could unfold once the envelope was opened. If the DNA results confirmed her legitimacy, the secret could remain between them, and life could continue as normal. However, if the tests revealed what her mother had suspected, they would need a carefully crafted plan to manage the crisis. The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock on the study door. Queen Camilla quickly secured the envelope and vial in her desk drawer as her private secretary entered to remind her of an upcoming engagement with a children's charity. The normalcy of the interruption felt surreal, given the magnitude of what they had been discussing. Marcus watched as the Queen seamlessly transitioned into her public role, her composure restored as if by magic. After the secretary left, Queen Camilla turned back to Marcus with renewed determination. I've spent too many years living in fear of the truth. Whatever those results say, I need to face them. But I want you to be here when I read them, so we can decide together how to proceed. Her voice carried a strength that hadn't been there. At the beginning of their conversation, Marcus agreed, understanding that witnessing this moment would make him complicit in whatever followed. As Queen Camilla retrieved the envelope from her drawer, he found himself thinking about the broader implications of their discovery. The British public's faith in the monarchy was built on tradition, legitimacy, and the unbroken chain of succession. If that chain was revealed to have a weak link, the consequences could extend far beyond the royal family itself. The Queen's hands were steady now as she carefully opened the sealed envelope. Marcus watched her face intently as she unfolded the laboratory report and began to read the technical language that would determine her fate. For several long moments, her expression remained neutral as she processed the scientific terminology and statistical analyses that made up the bulk of the document. Then, suddenly, Queen Camilla's face went completely white. Her hands began to tremble, and she had to sit down heavily in her chair. The report fluttered to the desk as she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Marcus didn't need to read the results to understand what they had revealed. The Queen's worst fears had been confirmed. "It's true," she whispered through her tears. "Everything my mother suspected was true. I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not who Charles thought he married. I'm not who the British people accepted as their queen consort." The weight of the revelation seemed to crush her spirit, and Marcus could see decades of carefully constructed identity crumbling before his eyes. Marcus moved closer, his protective instincts overriding protocol, as he placed a reassuring hand on the Queen's shoulder. "Your Majesty, you are still the same person you were an hour ago. Your character, your dedication to service, your love for King Charles, none of that has changed. What we've learned about your biological parentage doesn't diminish who you have become." But Queen Camilla shook her head, unable to accept his reassurance. "Don't you understand? This changes everything. My marriage to Charles could be seen as illegitimate. My position as queen consort is built on a foundation of lies. The constitutional implications alone could trigger a crisis that the monarchy might not survive. Her voice grew stronger with each word, driven by a growing sense of panic about the future. As they sat in the study, surrounded by centuries of royal history and tradition, both Marcus and Queen Camilla began to grasp the full magnitude of their situation. The DNA results hadn't just revealed a family secret. They had uncovered a truth that could potentially reshape the British constitutional system and the relationship between the monarchy and the people. The question that haunted them both was what to do with this devastating knowledge. Could they simply destroy the evidence and pretend the tests had never been conducted? Could they find a way to manage the truth without destroying the institution they both served? Or were they morally obligated to reveal what they had discovered, regardless of the consequences? Marcus realized that they were no longer dealing with a simple security matter or even a personal family crisis. They had stumbled upon information that could affect the lives of millions of people who depended on the stability and continuity of the British monarchy. The decisions they made in the coming hours and days would determine not just their own futures, but the future of one of the world's oldest and most respected institutions. The afternoon hours passed slowly as Marcus and Queen Camilla wrestled with their impossible situation. The Queen had recovered her composure somewhat, but the devastating revelation continued to weigh heavily on both of them. They had spent considerable time discussing various approaches to managing the crisis, each option presenting its own set of challenges and potential disasters. "There's something else you need to understand," Queen Camilla said suddenly, her voice taking on a more urgent tone. "The laboratory that conducted these tests, they have copies of everything. The samples, the results, all of it is documented in their systems. Even if we destroy what we have here, the evidence still exists elsewhere." This revelation added a new dimension to their already complex situation. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized the implications of what the Queen had just told him. "Are you saying that other people potentially have access to this information?" The thought that unknown individuals might possess evidence that could destroy the monarchy sent a chill down his spine. His mind immediately began cataloging all the ways this information could be weaponized against the royal family. Queen Camilla nodded grimly. "The laboratory specializes in discretion, but they're not immune to pressure or financial incentives. If someone wanted to obtain copies of these results, they could probably find a way. I've been terrified for months that this information might surface at the worst possible moment, perhaps during a state visit or before a major royal event." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of King Charles himself, who entered the study without his usual retinue of advisors and security personnel. Marcus immediately stood and bowed, while Queen Camilla quickly composed herself, though traces of her earlier distress were still visible. The king's presence changed the entire dynamic of their situation, introducing complications that neither of them had fully prepared for. "My darling," King Charles said to his wife, his voice filled with concern, "you've seemed troubled lately. I wanted to check on you personally, away from all the usual formalities and protocols." His genuine care for Queen Camilla was evident, making the weight of their secret even more unbearable. Marcus watched as the Queen struggled to maintain her composure in the face of her husband's loving concern. Queen Camilla exchanged a meaningful glance with Marcus, and he could see her internal struggle playing out in real time. She was torn between her desire to confess everything to her husband and her fear of destroying his faith in their marriage and in the monarchy itself. The moment stretched on, filled with tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the elegant study. "Charles," Queen Camilla began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you, something that could change everything between us and affect your reign in ways we can't even imagine." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, realizing that the Queen was about to make a decision that would determine all their fates. King Charles moved closer to his wife, his expression growing more serious as he sensed the gravity of whatever she was about to reveal. Whatever it is, we can face it together, he said firmly. We've weathered many storms over the years, and I have complete faith in our ability to handle whatever challenges may come. His unwavering support only seemed to make Queen Camilla's distress more acute. Marcus found himself in an impossible position as he watched the scene unfold. He was witnessing what could be one of the most significant moments in modern royal history. Yet he was powerless to influence the outcome. The Queen's decision to confess or remain silent would affect not just the royal family, but the entire British constitutional system and the millions of people who looked to the monarchy for stability. As Queen Camilla prepared to speak, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through the tall windows of the study, he could see unfamiliar figures moving through the palace gardens, individuals who definitely didn't belong to the regular security detail or palace staff. His trained eye immediately recognized the signs of surveillance equipment and coordinated movement that suggested a serious security breach. "Your Majesties," Marcus interrupted urgently, his professional instincts overriding protocol. "We have a situation. There are unauthorized individuals in the palace grounds, and they appear to be conducting surveillance." His announcement immediately shifted the focus from the personal crisis to a potential external threat, but Marcus suspected that the two situations might be more connected than anyone realized. King Charles immediately moved to the window, his expression hardening as he observed the suspicious activity in the gardens. "How did they get past our security perimeter?" he demanded. Marcus was already reaching for his radio to coordinate with other security personnel, but a terrible thought was forming in his mind. What if these intruders were here specifically because of the DNA test results? The possibility that someone had learned about Queen Camilla's secret and was now attempting to gather evidence or apply pressure created an entirely new level of crisis. Marcus realized that their window for managing this situation privately might be rapidly closing, and that external forces might soon dictate the terms of how this devastating secret would be revealed to the world. Marcus's radio crackled to life as reports flooded in from security teams throughout the palace grounds. The intruders had been identified as investigative journalists from a major international news organization equipped with long-range cameras and listening devices. Even more alarming, they seemed to know exactly where to position themselves to monitor the Queen's private study. The implications were clear and terrifying. Someone had provided them with inside information. "They know," Queen Camilla said, quietly, her voice filled with resignation. "Someone told them about the DNA tests, and they're here to document whatever comes next." King Charles turned from the window, his face a mixture of confusion and growing alarm as he began to understand that his wife's earlier distress was connected to this security breach in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Marcus made quick decisions, activating lockdown protocols and coordinating with palace security to remove the journalists from the grounds. But he knew that the damage was already done. If the media had gotten wind of the story, it was only a matter of time before it became public knowledge. The carefully controlled environment in which they had hoped to manage this crisis was rapidly dissolving. "Charles, sit down," Queen Camilla said firmly, her voice gaining strength now that the moment of truth had arrived. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but you need to understand everything before this story breaks in the media." King Charles complied, though his expression showed growing concern about what his wife was about to reveal. With Marcus standing guard by the door, Queen Camilla began to tell her husband about her mother's deathbed confession, the years of uncertainty that had followed, and the DNA tests that had confirmed her worst fears. King Charles listened in stunned silence as his wife revealed that her entire identity might be built on a foundation of lies, and that her legitimacy as queen consort was now in serious question. The king's reaction was not what either Marcus or Queen Camilla had expected. Instead of anger or disappointment, King Charles moved to embrace his wife, holding her close as she finished her painful confession. "My darling," he said softly. Do you really think that anything about your parentage could change how I feel about you or affect your right to stand beside me as my queen? Marcus watched as King Charles demonstrated the wisdom and compassion that had made him a respected monarch. The legitimacy of our marriage and your position as queen consort doesn't depend on who your biological father was, the king continued. It depends on who you are, what you've contributed to this country, and the love we share. No DNA test can change any of that. But Queen Camilla shook her head, pulling back to look directly into her husband's eyes. You don't understand the full implications, she said urgently. The media has this story now. There will be questions about constitutional law, about the succession, about whether our marriage itself is legitimate. The politicians and legal experts will have their say, and they might not be as understanding as you are. King Charles straightened, and Marcus could see him transitioning from concerned husband to reigning monarch. Then we'll face this challenge head-on, he declared. We'll be transparent about what we know. We'll let the constitutional experts examine the implications, and we'll let the British people decide whether they still want us as their royal family. Hiding from the truth has never been an option for this monarchy. Marcus felt a surge of admiration for both the king and queen as they faced the biggest crisis of their reign with dignity and courage. His role had evolved from protector to witness to counselor, and he realized that his initial discovery of the DNA vial had set in motion events that would reshape the British monarchy for generations to come. Over the following hours, as Palace, officials and legal experts were briefed on the situation, Marcus observed how a personal family secret had become a matter of national importance. The story would eventually break in the international media, sparking debates about legitimacy, tradition, and the relevance of monarchy in the modern world. But what struck Marcus most profoundly was how King Charles and Queen Camilla had faced this crisis together, their love and commitment to each other stronger than any questions about bloodlines or constitutional technicalities. The institution of monarchy might be tested by these revelations, but the human story at its center had proven resilient and genuine. In the end, Marcus realized that his discovery had done more than expose a potentially damaging secret. It had revealed the true character of the people he served and protected. The DNA results might have challenged Queen Camilla's biological legitimacy, but they had also demonstrated the emotional and moral legitimacy of her marriage to King Charles and her dedication to the British people. As the sun set over the palace that evening, Marcus understood that he had witnessed history in the making. The consequences of this revelation would unfold over months and years to come, but the courage and integrity displayed by the royal couple in their darkest hour would be remembered as the defining moment of King Charles's reign. The institution of monarchy would survive, strengthened rather than weakened by its willingness to confront difficult truths with honesty and grace.